So this is a tweet from MIT Technology Review, and can you read the...
Yeah, so it says, this new workplace monitoring tool issues an alert when anyone is less than 6 feet apart. Amazon is also using similar software to monitor the distances between their warehouse staff. And here we have a video of people walking on a street from a surveillance camera, and they have green squares around them if they're 6 feet apart from somebody else, and red squares and a line connecting them to anybody that they are not 6 feet apart from.
I think the freaky part about this is Amazon is also using similar software to monitor the distances between their warehouse staff.
Mm-hmm.
So what does this mean? If you clump up like this, they're gonna fire you?
Yeah, seems like it. Dock your pay.
Are they gonna have like little friendly drones flying around to beep boop at us if we're too close to other humans?
Yeah. This is just absolutely, and this is not by any means an impossible thing to be implemented. I mean, it already exists in countries like China where they literally identify whether or not you have coronavirus by the temperature of your skin with thermo-detecting glasses. It's like, this is so close to reality.
Right.
We can so become this in a matter of days.
And we're going
We're here.
So this article is written by Whitney Webb. She is living in Chile, because I think if she didn't live there, they'd kill her, but she's an American. She was really, really big on all the Epstein stuff. Like, basically called it all before anyone else did. I mean, Alex Jones and like a lot of conspiracy theorists did have a lot of true information, but she's a journalist. So it's like, nothing she's really reported has been proven to be untrue about it. But now she's really focused on she was able to obtain a lot of freedom of information documents that were talking about, the government was talking a year ago about how to essentially capitalize on a crisis like this to implement technological advancements, I'm using big air quotes here, in order to not really improve our lives, but to maintain hegemony over China, like in their culture. So it's basically like our overlords are willing to fundamentally alter our lives for the negative in order to be technologically competitive with a dystopian, communist, horrible society. So here we go.
Yeah. All right. Techno-Tyranny, how the U.S. national security state is using coronavirus to fulfill an Orwellian vision. All right. Do you want me to just start at the start?
Yeah, and I'll move it around where it starts to get redundant.
All right.
Because it's a long one.
Last year, a government commission called for the U.S. to adopt an AI-driven mass surveillance system far beyond that used in any other country in order to ensure American hegemony in artificial intelligence. Now, many of the obstacles they had cited as preventing its implementation are rapidly being removed under the guise of combating the coronavirus crisis. Last year, a U.S. government body dedicated to examining how artificial intelligence can address the national security and defense needs of the United States discussed in detail the structural changes that the American economy and society must undergo in order to ensure a technological advantage over China, according to a Freedom of Information Act request or a document that was acquired through Freedom of Information Act. This document suggests that the U.S. Follow China's lead and even surpass them in many aspects related to AI-driven technologies, particularly their use of mass surveillance. This perspective clearly clashes with the public rhetoric of prominent U.S. government officials and politicians on China who have labeled the Chinese government's technology investments and export of its surveillance systems and other technologies as a major threat to Americans' way of life.
So you could read that. You could read that first paragraph and be like, okay, like this may just be some people in the government that have this kind of wacky idea. But when we get further down into it, you'll see how many heads of tech organizations are involved in a committee that was formed to just combat this problem. And all these same names are now involved in the name of public safety, implementing this insane amount of technology. So, like, hang on one second.
Yeah, sure.
So read this next paragraph if you don't mind.
One middle there?
Yeah.
In addition, many of the steps for the implementation of such a program in the U.S., as laid out in this newly available document, are currently being promoted and implemented as part of the government's response to the current crisis. This likely due to the fact that many members of the same body have considerable overlap with the task forces and advisors currently guiding the government's plans to reopen the economy and efforts to use technology to respond to the current crisis.
This is the next one, and I'll move on.
The Freedom of Information Act document obtained by the Electronic Privacy Information Center, EPIC, was this is totally epic, dude, was produced by a little-known U.S. government organization called the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence.
Okay, so remember that name. That's going to be very important.
NSCAI.
And it was created by
the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, in 2018.
So to kind of put that in perspective, what you're basically seeing is tech organizations are now going to work with the military to keep us, big quotes, safe. And so it's so technology controls every aspect of our life. I mean, like, you know, you cannot really exist in this society already without your phone, without so much shit. I mean, that's foisted upon us to just maintain a metropolitan. But really, everybody has to have this shit now. So, I mean, I have to get to a certain thing. 1 second.
Yeah, sure.
So here, can you read this article or this part here?
Yep. However, their main focus is ensuring that, quote, the United States maintain a technological advantage in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and other associated technologies related to national security and defense. The vice chair of NSCAI, Robert Work, former Deputy Secretary of Defense and senior fellow at the Hawkish Center for a New American Security, described the commission's purpose as determining, quote, how the U.S. national security apparatus should approach artificial intelligence, including a focus on how the government can work with industry to compete with China's civil-military fusion concept.
And compete just means make us do the same thing.
Yep.
And so let me. So this gets
civil-military fusion.
This
that
gets a little bit
awful.
redundant. So let me get to a.
Sure.
She's such a good writer and is so thorough, but she gets a little verbose. So blah blah blah. We got that. All right. I don't think that's important. Hang on 1 second.
Where are we reading this? The Last American Vagabond.
It's her site, but okay. So and of course
you can find this there if you guys want to read the rest of it.
I'll actually put the link in the description of the video. So okay, so this thing you see here is from the FOIA request.
Okay, so this is the document then. Open questions for the future of technology. In which other tech-enabled verticals will China's adoption advantage allow it to leapfrog the U.S.? My predictions: AI medical diagnosis, smart cities. Next bullet point. How does the U.S. defend its advantage in core creation? No answer to that. Next bullet point. For verticals where Chinese companies are world leaders, expand beyond Chinese borders. What does it mean for Chinese tech giants to have control of pieces of critical digital infrastructure in other countries? Who makes decisions? To what extent can they stand up to the government?
So this bit right here, for verticals where Chinese companies or our world leaders expand beyond Chinese borders, what they're talking about is basically like their involvement in Africa now, like how and so really this is it's about maintaining our superiority over them, which we sold to them. So like that's why this is so insane that like now as a populace we're having to suffer because of the decisions of administrations that sold us out to China years ago. And so
that sounds like imperialism.
So here's where it gets spicy, this bit here.
Okay. Chief among the troublesome structural factors highlighted in this presentation are so-called legacy systems that are common.
Remember that term, legacy systems.
That are common in the US, but much less so in China. The NSCAI document states that the examples of legacy systems include a financial system that still utilizes cash and card payments. That's your whole wallet. Individual car ownership, and even receiving medical attention from a human doctor. It states that while these legacy systems in the U.S. are, quote, good enough, too many good enough systems hinder the adoption of new things. That's the end of the quote, specifically AI-driven systems. Another structural factor deemed by the NSCAI to be an obstacle to the U.S.'s ability to maintain a technological advantage over China is the, quote, scale of the consumer market, arguing that extreme urban density is equal to on-demand service adoption. In other words, extreme urbanization results in more people using online or mobile-based on-demand services, ranging from ride-sharing to like Uber to online shopping like Instacart. It also cites the use of mass surveillance on China's huge population base cites the use of mass surveillance on China's huge population base as an example of how China's scale of consumer market advantage, allowing China to leap ahead in the fields of related technologies like facial recognition. This too?
Yep.
So this is directly from the
FOIA document.
The FOIA document as well. Creation, adoption, iteration. The U.S. leads in the creation stage. Core technology and user paradigms are still largely invented here. Next bullet point. But adoption happens far more quickly in China due to structural factors. The most significant of these structural factors that allow them to adopt new technologies are lack of legacy systems. For example, lack of credit cards equaling mobile payment. Next structural factor, scale of consumer market. For example, extreme urban density. That's on-demand service adoption. Explicit government support and involvement, e.g. facial recognition deployment. So China has all of these things that make it easy for them to adopt new technologies to further advance their society. And so it sounds like from this, we want to have all of these things in place, like no more credit cards, extreme urban density. We all live in cities, and extreme government involvement to further adopt technologies to better our society, whatever that means, you know.
So here's this next bit.
Okay. The document also defines another aspect of government support as the clearing of regulatory barriers. This term is used in the document specifically with respect to U.S. privacy laws, despite the fact that the U.S. national security state has long violated these laws with near complete impunity. However, the document seems to suggest that privacy laws in the U.S. should be altered so that what the U.S. government has done in secret with private citizen data can be done more openly and more extensively. The NSCAI document also discusses the removal of regulatory barriers in order to speed up the adoption of self-driving cars, even though autonomous driving technology has resulted in several deadly and horrific car accidents and presents other safety concerns.
So this is just basically the document confirming what you just read.
Yep.
Let me have to scan again. Sorry.
Yeah. Holy fucking
right,
shit.
so
Yeah, happy Earth Day, everybody.
Yeah, happy
This
happy
is the New World Order.
Yeah. Okay, so here's this next bit.
What will replace the U.S.'s legacy systems? Given that the document makes it quite clear that the legacy systems in the U.S. are impeding its ability to prevent China from leapfrogging ahead in AI and then dominating it for the foreseeable future, it is also important to examine what the document suggests should replace these legacy systems in the U.S. As previously mentioned, one legacy system cited early on in the presentation is the main means of payment for most Americans, cash and credit card or debit cards. The presentation asserts, in contrast to these legacy systems, that the best and most advanced system is moving entirely to smartphone-based digital wallets.
So this next paragraph is fucking fascinating to me.
Okay. It notes specifically the main mobile wallet provider in India, Paytm, is majority owned by Chinese companies. It quotes an article which states that a big break came in 2016 when India canceled 86% of currency in circulation in an effort to cut corruption and bring more people into the tax net by forcing them to use less cash. At the time, claims that India's 2016 currency reform would be used as a stepping stone towards a cashless society were dismissed by some as conspiracy theory. However, last year, a committee convened by India's central bank and led by an Indian tech oligarch who also created India's massive civilian biometric database, resulted in the Indian government's Cashless India program. Regarding India's currency reform, the NSCAI document then asserts that this would be unfathomable in the West. And surprisingly, when 86% of the cash got canceled and nobody had a credit card, mobile wallets in India exploded, laying the groundwork for a far more advanced payments ecosystem in India than the US. However, it has become increasingly less unfathomable in light of the current coronavirus crisis, which has seen efforts to reduce the amount of cash because paper bills may carry the virus.
See, and that's
the angle.
That's the angle.
As well as efforts to introduce a Federal Reserve-backed digital dollar.
And if you don't know,
Trump
the
coins.
Federal Reserve is not a government entity, and yet they are the ones distributing money to the rest of us. They are a psychotically unregulated, non-government entity that is basically used to distribute money to everybody else. It is insane that, like, and Trump has been calling for this. It's like something I give him credit for. Is like there needs to be oversight for the Fed. It's absolutely insane.
Of course,
because
I'm actually just learning about this in my economics class.
Like how do they have so much control and power and they are not a government entity? It's insane. And
I mean, the thing is, like, money is power, and you don't need to be in the government to have power.
Clearly.
So, like, yeah, the Fed obviously has this insane amount of power, and they're the lender of last resort or whatever. So banks all rely on them, and we all rely on banks. So it's the chain of command where if we, during this crisis, all want to take out our money from our checkings account, we can't unless the Federal Reserve decides that we can. The Federal Reserve would loan the money to banks, and then banks would give us the money. Banks will fail. They owe it all to the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve becomes all powerful, even though it's privatized, and we're suddenly slaves to them now. It's like, Jesus Christ!
And
that's the only the only way, you know.
Every person who's on the board of the Federal Reserve is worth over $100 million. There is nobody, and like some of the more like progressive people that have like wanted some oversight of the Fed have said, well, 50% of the people on the board should be worth less than $1 million.
I think if my memory serves me, and I may be totally wrong, the president appoints people who are on the Federal Reserve.
I don't know, to be honest. Maybe, I feel like Nianoni would know this, but I don't know.
Think, and I had a fucking economics exam today about this kind of shit, so I may just be mixing up two different entities. But from what I remember, and again, this may be totally wrong, but the Federal Reserve is made up of like 7 people on the board who make decisions on when to loan money, and they have 14-year terms.
Right.
That are non-renewable. They cannot be on it again, but when it expires, the president appoints them, I think.
I don't know.
And then there's one chairman who's like the head of it, who has a 4-year renewable term. So he could get appointed again and again and again.
Yeah.
But that is the president's job to decide that when somebody's term is up. I think that's the Federal Reserve.
The reality is it's a fucking mess. I mean, that's like really the crux of this. So here we go.
Another legacy system that the NSCAI seeks to overhaul is car ownership, as it promotes. I'm gonna pop these off.
Yeah, actually, you don't need them anymore.
Yeah. Seeks to overhaul is car ownership, as it promotes autonomous or self-driving vehicles and further asserts that fleet ownership is greater than individual ownership. It specifically points to a need for a centralized ride-sharing network, which it says is needed to coordinate cars to achieve near 100% utilization rates. However, it warns against ride-sharing networks that, quote, need a human operator paired with each vehicle, and also asserts that fleet ownership makes more sense than individual car ownership. It also specifically calls for these fleets to not only be composed of self-driving cars, but electric cars, and cites reports that China has the world's most aggressive electric vehicle goals and seeks the lead in an emerging industry. The document states that China's leads in ride-sharing today, even though ride-sharing was pioneered first in the U.S. It asserts once again that the U.S. legacy system of individual car ownership and lack of extreme urban density are responsible for China's dominance in this area. It's because they have new systems in place which allow them to adopt new technologies quicker. It also predicts that China will achieve mass autonomous vehicle adoption before the U.S., largely because the lack of mass car ownership in China leads to far more consumer receptiveness.
So just China's general lack of individual autonomy, which is not what you want.
Right.
It's not at all what you want.
If that isn't the fucking ripest point of all of this, is that, like, if this happens to us, we'll lose who we are as people, as individuals, and
become like China, which is where there is no sense of individuality.
Right.
It is a completely homogenized horseshit society. It's awful. And so I know we're just Tim Pooling this shit and reading it, but this
I was thinking the same
this thing is so fucking dense that, like, I couldn't really figure out a way to paraphrase it. Number one. Number two, is I wanted
without
you guys,
sounding like a loon, because this is words on a page, but if we were to just say
I needed you guys to physically see or hear the FOIA things, because this proves that these are government documents that were written, which is what's important.
And we as people can request these, but the thing is, like, it is so insanely difficult to request FOIA documents, because so much of these deals are privatized,
Right?
Meaning that they are not government deals,
right? Sorry, and even what they got here, a shitload of it was redacted.
Of course, and it's all because there are enough laws in place for the Freedom of Information Act to not breach into private companies, which is fine, whatever. Like, private individuals and companies, they should have protected information. But when it comes down to the Freedom of Information Act, you cannot request certain things, like about funding, because funding might be happening between private companies, even though the government is causing it to happen. When something happens in a privatized company, we don't have a right to know that information, even though it's, like taxpayer dollars. It could be happening with privatized, just military industrial companies that we really cannot, we don't have access to. And they refuse our access.
And we're going to
deny
really deep into the commingling of these two different entities, the government and private industry.
Yeah.
Because you'll start to see, like, this NSCIA or CAI. You're about to see who sits on this board, and it's fucking gross. So, cool. But first, I want you to read this thing here.
Yeah. In addition to their vision for a future financial system and future self-driving transport system, the NSCAI has a similarly dystopian vision for surveillance. The document calls mass surveillance one of the first and best customers for AI and a killer application for deep learning. It also states that having streets carpeted with cameras is good infrastructure.
So here's from the FOIA.
Here we go. State data sets. Surveillance equals smart cities. Alibaba has been selected to the national AI team for smart city applications.
Alibaba is China's Amazon. I'm sorry, it's their Google.
Oh, okay.
It's China's Google.
It turns out that having streets carpeted with cameras is good infrastructure for smart cities as well. Close collaboration with the government allows Alibaba to gather information like car and foot traffic data based on surveillance cameras. Government data mixed with Alibaba's own data and expertise in computing is a potent combination. Alibaba's City Brain product is being used in pilot cities like their home city of Hangzhou, to optimize the timing of red lights for traffic flow and ambulances and to redirect traffic if certain areas are under construction. It's purportedly reduced traffic time by 15.3% and cut ambulance arrival time by 50% in pilot areas. Soon, municipalities will be able to make every infrastructure decision, from filling potholes to building subway lines, based on complete data of how every person is moving through the city in real time.
Yeah. Cool. So how is this making you feel?
It's just like, why do we want to be China so fucking bad?
To win. To win, and we won't.
It's money,
without us all getting sacrificed in the process.
Yeah, of course.
Let's see here. Let me skip ahead a little bit.
It's truly, disheartening, but I'm not surprised to see that this is what's happening. And thank God for this reporter who is doing the work to get these documents for us, because it's not easy to get things.
So you ready for it to get even darker?
Yeah, let's fucking do it.
All right, here you go.
All right, more troubling, it argues that the potential impact of government-supplied data is even more significant in biology and healthcare, and says it is likely that the Chinese government will require every single citizen to have their DNA sequenced and stored in government databases, something nearly impossible to imagine in places as privacy-conscious as the US and Europe.
And yet with 23andMe, we're already doing this voluntarily.
We're already doing it. Yeah. And it's because we can't request that information. We don't truly know about it, but it's real.
It's real.
It continues by saying that the Chinese apparatus is well equipped to take advantage and calls these civilian DNA databases a logical next step. This is from the document, State Datasets, Biotech and Healthcare. The potential impact of government-supplied data is even more significant in biology and healthcare. In the near future, it wouldn't be a surprise to see the Chinese government require every single citizen to have their DNA sequenced and stored in government databases. The Chinese apparatus is well equipped to take advantage. Tencent has already been named to the National AI Team for medical diagnosis using computer vision, and a logical next step would be medical advancements utilizing government DNA data.
Yeah, Neononi says our winning over China is the definition of a Pyrrhic victory, and that's very accurate.
Yeah.
So here's where it gets creepy. Who are the NSCAI?
Yeah.
So here are the members as follows. I'll let you grab
Yeah,
this.
absolutely. Okay. Safra Katz, CEO of Oracle, with close ties to Trump's top donor Sheldon Adelson. Steve Chien, supervisor of the artificial intelligence group at Caltech's Jet Propulsion Lab. Mignon Clyburn, Open Society Foundation fellow and former FCC commissioner. Chris Darby, CEO of In-Q-Tel, CIA's venture capital arm.
And who knew that the CIA had a venture capital arm?
Interesting. They just must be like they're diversifying their portfolio. Ken Ford, CEO of the Florida Institute for Human and Machine Cognition. You can't trust anybody from Florida. Jose Marie Griffiths, president of Dakota State University and former National Science Board member. Eric Horvitz, director of Microsoft Research Labs. I knew we'd see Microsoft in here somewhere.
Of course.
Andy Jassy, CEO of Amazon Web Services and CIA contractor. Also very cool. I knew we'd also see Amazon in here. I was just waiting for it. Gilman Louis, partner at Alsop Louis Partners and former CEO of In-Q-Tel. Oh, there's some.
This one here.
William Mark, director of SRI International and former Lockheed Martin director. Fuck, dude. Jason Matheny, director of the Center for Security and Emerging Technology, former assistant director of National Intelligence, and former director of IARPA, Intelligence Advanced Research Project Agency. Katarina McFarland, consultant at Cyprus International and former Assistant Secretary of Defense for Acquisition. And thank God there's a woman on this board.
Yeah,
I was waiting. It's full of probably white men on this board.
Yeah.
Come on, thank you. Finally, we need a woman oppressor. Andrew Moore, head of Google Cloud AI. Oh, they got all three of the big ones: Google, Amazon, and Microsoft.
Yep.
Just waiting for Apple and YouTube. Well, Google's in there. As can be seen in the list above, there's a considerable amount of overlap between the NSCAI and the companies currently advising the White House on reopening the economy. Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Lockheed Martin, Oracle. And one NSCAI member, Oracle's Safra Katz, is on the White House's Economic Revival Task Force, just like, what's her name? Loeffler,
yeah.
Loeffler, excuse me. Also, there's overlap between the NSCAI and the companies that are intimately involved in the implementation of the contact tracing coronavirus surveillance system. Holy shit, dude. A mass surveillance system promoted by the Jared Kushner-led private sector coronavirus task force. That surveillance system is set to be constructed by companies with deep ties to Google and the U.S. national security state, both Google and Apple, who create the operating systems for the vast majority of smartphones used in the U.S., have said that they will now build the surveillance system directly into their smartphone.
And you saw that article, right,
systems.
where they were talking about how they were going to do contact tracing, Apple
Yes.
and Android? Yeah. So also this bit here.
Also notable is the fact that In-Q-Tel in the U.S. intelligence community has considerable representation on the NSCAI, and that they also boast close ties with Google, Palantir, and other Silicon Valley giants, having been early investors in those companies. Both Google and Palantir, as well as Amazon, also on the NSCAI, are major contractors for U.S. intelligence agencies. In-Q-Tel's involvement on the NSCAI is also significant because they have been heavily promoting
mass surveillance of consumer electronic devices for use in pandemics for the past several years.
They're finally getting what they want. And all it took was a national emergency.
In-Q-Tel's current executive vice president, Tara O'Toole, another female representation, who was previously the director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security and also co-authored several controversial BioWare pandemic solutions such as Dark Winter.
Biowarfare.
Yeah. Thank you.
Pandemics.
That's why I'm not reading this.
In addition, since at least January, the U.S. intelligence community and the Pentagon have been at the forefront of developing the U.S. government's still classified 9/11-style response plans for the coronavirus crisis alongside the National Security Council. Few news organizations have noted that these classified response plans, which are set to be triggered if and when the U.S. reaches a certain number of coronavirus cases, has been created largely by elements of the national security state, i.e. the NSC, Pentagon, and intelligence, as opposed to civilian agencies or those focused on public health issues.
So this is my last bit, and then we'll start to.
Great.
I think there might be one more thing I want to grab, but
I'm starting to feel a bit more like Tim Pool now.
Yeah.
I also need some water because I'm starting to get Mark Wahlberg mouth.
Mark Wahlberg.
I'm like turning into Larry King. Furthermore, it has been reported that the U.S. intelligence community has, as well as U.S. military intelligence, knew by at least January, though recent reports have said as early as last November, which that came out like a week or two ago, that the coronavirus crisis would reach pandemic proportions by March. The American public were not warned, but elite members of the business and political classes were apparently informed, given the record numbers of CEO resignations in January and several high-profile insider trading allegations that preceded the current crisis by a matter of weeks. And that's no fucking secret, obviously.
I mean, like, and Loeffler, who's somebody who got caught up in that, is now on the reopen task force.
And like, it starts at the top and it goes even higher. It's just like, it's the most ludicrous thing that it's so obvious how little power we have over the people who want to make decisions for us. Voting doesn't do anything. Is there another paragraph that you got here that I should get into?
I don't think so. I think that we probably got the idea. But Nianoni says, please be sure to link the article. I really need to read the whole thing. Yeah, right when we end this stream, I'll put it in the description of the video.
Yeah.
And it's completely well cited. This is not some fucking conspiracy horseshit.
Right. And where are her citations? Didn't you say that there's like a list of all of her?
Yeah, I mean they're like all the basically everything.
Oh, all of the links are citations.
Yeah, well, yeah, all the links are citations from other things that so all the red bits here that you guys can see, these are all cited. And then,
wait, can you click on any of them, or is it just? I don't think you can.
Yeah.
Oh, you can?
Yep.
Okay,
and then
great.
it goes to a Washington Post article. Yeah.
Your cursor didn't change, so I was like, wait a minute. But yeah, so all of these things that are in red on the screen now, you can click on and see the citations.
And mostly what she's reporting on is, so I mean, like, let's take for examples the other members of this group, which are all these crazy CEO people. We can click that and see where this goes. Yeah, so they're out in the open. This is them.
Oh, there are actually several women on this board.
Yeah, and it's pretty diverse crew of ghouls.
Oh, Jose Marie Griffiths is a woman. I thought it might be Josie.
Yeah. So these are the ghouls that are about to ruin your life.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's all cited, and then also too, like most of the things that she's extrapolating upon are from information she gleaned from the FOIA request.